Hey guys, welcome to Wrench to Drive. Today we're doing something a little different. This is a really quick review of the absolute cheapest airbrush I have ever seen. The only reason I'm bothering with this is not because it's awesome, because it was crazy cheap, my friends. This little airbrush kit, 10 Canadian dollars. That's like $6-7 American. Now the reason it was so cheap, AliExpress had this thing going where you put together a group of stuff, and I'm trying to remember what the amount it had to be. I think it had to be more than $20 Canadian if I recall correctly. It wasn't a super huge amount. This little thing was $10. On Amazon, a kit like this is more like $40 to $50, something like that. Way more money, totally not worth gambling on, because that's a little too much money to just throw away, right? So for $10 I figured I'd gamble. That's the full disclosure. I got a couple other little things, packaged up with this. I think it all comes out of one warehouse. They send it to you. It gets to you very quickly. It's via that choice shipping that they've got now. Got to me insanely fast. Everything was good. So I wanted to try out this little compressor. That's what this is. This is a little air compressor. I wanted to try this out. That's the sole reason I rolled the dice. Okay? And it works with a regular airbrush. This is just a cheapo that I've had for a long time. All you gotta do is take off the fitting that's on it. You can screw on the air compressor, as you can see. Now, the big downside, the big problem, if you look in there, there's no air valve, right? So this is a single action. All this does is it works the paint. That means that when you put this thing on and you turn it on, there's continuous airflow. I don't think that is even remotely desirable. Okay, so I am not telling you that this thing is awesome. It's not. If you're looking for an airbrush, this is probably not even worth buying for a beginner. If you're serious, like if you're looking for an airbrush, for something that does what an airbrush does, purely, okay? If you're looking for something that sprays paint, which is, an airbrush is a little more than that, my friends, and it's outside the topic of this video. An airbrush is a little more than that, okay? So if you're just looking for something that sprays paint, you can do a simple paint job. You can paint simple parts, things like that. That's where this little $10 gimmick might not be super terrible. Now, for example, in the RC car world, you can buy yourself some Vallejo paint for, let's call it $10. It's less than $10, but let's call it $10, because that's the price of one can of Tamiya. One of these little bottles will paint multiple cars, multiple bodies, right? So it's way cheaper. If you got to spend $100 on a compressor and $50 on an airbrush, even a cheap one, that's kind of a lot of money just to paint a few bodies. Well, if this thing works with this little airbrush, that's a lot less money, right? $10. Can't go wrong. Spoilers, I've already tried this out. It does seem to spray paint. Seems usable, so I'm just going to test it out really quick. I'm going to paint this box. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to see how it sprays and show you on this video, and then you can be the judge. If I can get a decent, nice flat matte finish on this without any heinousness, in my opinion, that means it sprays. Because if I can do it on this box, I can do it on a body. As I mentioned, the only downside is it sprays air continuously. Now, I believe the intent of this little jobby is to decorate cakes and to spray nails, like in a what do you call that? In a manicure type place. Not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure how they use these types of deals. I'm not sure why this would be the way to go. I think a proper airbrush would be better in that environment as well. I don't know. All I know is I'm going to try it spraying paint. So I'm just going to load up some paint and I will show you in a second. Alright, so let's give it a try. So all you do is you turn on the air with this little button and then you use the trigger to control the paint. And like I said, it sprays air continuously. So let's see what happens. I think you can hear that. Seems to have plugged up. I had a little bit of trouble with that initially. I got quite a bit of spray and then it seemed to plug up on me. So for this time around I added a little bit of flow improver and a little bit of thinner, and it seems to have plugged up again, so that does not bode super well. Let's try and see if that cleaning out got it. Okay, so there we go, it's spraying again. Maybe I'm getting a little too frisky. Let's see here. Alright, so for those of you that don't know much about airbrushing, usually when you're spraying with an airbrush, the paint dries very, very quickly because the amount of airflow actually helps it dry almost as soon as it goes on. So the fact that this is still so wet, it's putting a lot of paint on there. Now, normally with black, you do get pretty good coverage. To me, this doesn't look like an insane amount more coverage. It seems like it's putting on a goodly amount, and there's just not nearly as much airflow as there is with a regular airbrush. So, I don't know. There's a lot of splatter, I think you can see, depending on how the light hits it, which you normally don't get. And I'm not a master airbrusher. Don't get me all twisted, guys. Don't pretend I'm telling you I'm awesome at this. I'm not. All I know is that, for example, my black slash, I painted the outside of my rally slash body with flat black, and it turned out really nice. There's not a splatter to be seen on it. Okay, so that's my benchmark. That's kind of where I'm normally at. I can easily spray paint onto something and not have it go mental. Okay, so this is definitely not as good. Now, if you're painting the inside of a polycarbonate body, none of this crap would show up. All you're looking to do is get coverage. So if that's what you're buying it for, it would definitely do the job. Now, I have not farted around with this much, and my first go around I did not get this much splatter, so maybe I thinned it a little too much, maybe I used a little too much flow improver. But my first go around, like I said, I did get a little bit of clogging. And this go around, I think maybe the clogging I got was in the little bit that got into the airbrush before the mixed up part got into the airbrush, because obviously, you know, the most recent spraying has been good. Let's spray a little air on this, see if we can dry this paint quicker. Oh yeah, there we go. That's drying really quickly. Okay, so the amount of airflow that you get through this thing is definitely not to your advantage if you're trying to do a paint job. If you and I dialed back the amount of paint that goes through, so let's just see what happens when I get this dry and give it another coat. Yeah, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I'm just doing it to test this out. I think this sprays at 20 psi, and I believe my regular setup sprays at 50 or 60. So that's probably the big difference that we're seeing here. And obviously more air does dry it. Yeah, lots of splatter. Look at all that splatter. Can you see that? Yeah, I think we can see that. So I don't know why there's so much splatter. That seems kind of strange. Probably needs to be cleaned out. I have never had anything resembling this kind of trouble with a real airbrush. Not even close. So whatever's going wrong, I'm blaming this airbrush. It's not a world beater. I'm trying to think and speak on a subject that I'm not super well versed. Now, my 2 cents worth, I have had this airbrush apart, and it's super cheap, super crappy. Like, it is not even remotely decent quality. This is a $20 Chinese airbrush, super cheap, not a world beater by any stretch of the imagination. It's way better, guys. Little details like just the quality of the metal, the quality of the threads, you name it, it's all better. And it has an air valve and blah blah. It's a dual action airbrush like you would expect. I gotta say, for $10 Canadian, I'm not overly upset. I'm gonna play with this a little bit and see if I can get it spraying better. Alright guys, let's have another crack at this. So just so you know, the compressor actually doesn't work with this Canadian Tire brush because the jar is in the way. The compressor's too big. So that's an obstacle. If you got the little jar kind like this, can't use it. Oopsie, don't make a mess. Alright, now the upside is it should work with my Chinese cheapo, so let's give it a go. Alright, fingers crossed. Nothing. What the hell? Alright, one more try with some white paint with the cheapo. Yeah, I was doing pretty good till right at the end there. Oh, I see. Okay, that was no thinner, no flow improver, just paint. And we got a lot of paint in the tip there. So presumably, if I clean that out, that might solve our problem. Let's see. Yep, no splatter. Alright, so that worked a lot better. Hardly any splatter. Now I dialed the paint way back, and I didn't thin it, so I think thinning it was a problem. Thicker is better. This thing moves a lot of paint compared to a normal airbrush, as we saw with that Chinese cheapo. So, is that any good? Obviously I got a little splatter in there. I don't know how well we can see it. There's definitely some splatter, so you want to avoid that, but that was 100% on me. The rest of this actually didn't turn out too terrible. And obviously that was white on black, so the coverage is not spectacular. Needs another coat. That's not terrible. So, I think with a little bit of farting around, this thing is not unusable. You're going to want to be careful, like I said, for an RC body, painting the inside. I think you're probably alright. If you're trying to paint something really nice, probably worth investing in something better. But with a little practice, I'm not at all convinced that this is unusable. I think it might work okay. I'll have to play around with it a little bit more. If I come to any horrific conclusion, I will update. But for now, not that bad. That's it for this edition of Wrench to Drive, where we ask the eternal question: do you drive to wrench, or you wrench to drive? See you next time.